All right, welcome everybody to another episode of our Future Systems Podcast live Q&A show. Whew, I love saying that. That's fun. That's fun. This week, we have one of our technology consultants, Jared Lewis. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, you are our first technology consultant to be on
Was
the
I?
show many months ago.
I did not know that.
Yeah, early on in all of this, and so welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was great to be back. I had a great time. Lots of people reached out with questions, so it was a blast.
Oh, good. I hope for the same after this as well. And yeah, I guess we'll just kind of jump right into it. How are things going?
Busy.
I always hesitate to say like the sales guys because you guys don't really. It's not really a traditional sort of salesy sort of thing. That's why you're more of a consultant. And so things been
busy.
Yeah.
Lots of, and not just busy in the sense of orders. There's lots going on in the world of technology, in the world of parts. So it's like on top of things constantly changing and adapting, we're just as busy as can be. So we've adapted to that. We've added a couple of new team members here at Puget, Braden and Chrissy, who have both joined the technology consulting staff. So we're excited. Both of them are killing it, and a couple great resources to help just balance that load. So we're having a great time, but we're keeping up.
Cool. So I guess you in busy meaning like just like new kind of potential customers and things coming in.
Yeah, there's a lot of, the combination. One thing we had touched on before with the pandemic, a lot of people working from home, ordering new systems. People are saying, hey, I need my home system to do what the engineering system at work does. It's changed the dynamic of how people work. We're a lot of game developers that have their development staff scattered, all over the country. So it's changed how we process orders, how we ship. And also on top of that, just people trying to locate.
I shadowed once. Oh man, a couple of years ago, I shadowed a colleague of ours, Jeff, and yeah, it seems very every day is a little different.
Yeah,
which is super cool.
And that's what I enjoy about it. You never know what the next call, what challenge that's going to bring. So
right. Yeah. Speaking of work from home stuff, have you noticed that people are trying to accomplish like? I know our main focus is kind of these really high-end workstations, and people are trying to replicate that at home, or are they more trying to like remote in and do work that sort of way?
I would say the bulk of it is replicate at home. A lot of what I hear is, hey, I need a render box, or I need I hear from engineers, or actually even sometimes it's been the supervisor, the director of the project. I need to get these to my engineers at home because the systems that they have, the personal systems don't match what we have here at work. So that's really, I'd say the bulk of it. We do have a few that are remote access, not as common.
I see. I know recently too, and I pause for a moment because got to be careful not to name names, but one of our bigger customers, we found out that we were shipping them the machines, they were imaging them, and then shipping them again to their developers. And so we kind of developed a new internal way of helping them kind of streamline that process by, well, I'll let you kind of describe what it is we did to kind of help them with that.
Well, they have a, if you picture it, you have a development staff scattered across multiple states. People are working from home. So they have a third step. They get the system from us. They would unbox it. They would do their system setup, their development toolkits and things like that. Then ship it again. These are not small. These systems can be anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds plus, depending on what you put in them. Our packaging we protect them well. It's extensive. So we make sure that it, all that packaging protects it, but that adds weight. So that extra step not only adds time, it adds a lot of money. And what we develop now is the ability for our customers to have a remote imaging solution where they can set up their development to all the stuff that they need to do before the system ships. And then that can eliminate that intermediary step, and it saves them time in the process. It gets the system in the hand of the developer a lot quicker.
Yeah, that's cool. I like how I feel that was really a neat sort of project that we I guess, took on as it kind of almost added like an extra service to kind of help them out to get them where they needed to be a lot easier. That was really cool.
And it speeds up the process too, again, because everybody's working remote, instead of having to go through that third step of going to the third party first. So trying to adapt and I think the thing, it's changing sometimes. We could probably do this podcast in 3 hours and I might have different answers on some of this stuff. So
for sure. Yeah.
it changes that quickly.
Right. That actually brings me to another good question. Have you noticed much of a shift late? Because things seem to be kind of getting better. I've seen a lot of articles myself about, returning back to the office sort of thing, or a lot more of the hybrid sort of workflows. Has that changed what customers are asking for?
I think not in the core system. We test the application, and
right.
There can be some nuances to, like, if you need to access that remotely or form factor, things like that. But that, I think, is more based on what you're using it for, and the rest of it will kind of fall outside of that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That makes sense. I guess to move on to a different one, kind of talking about like the developer, we wouldn't have changed had such a dramatic change in a process just for somebody who's only buying one or two machines from us. This customer is on they get a lot from us very often. And so I'm curious how those conversations go when we are approached by a larger client like that, who says, hey, I need 25, I'm spooling up a new whatever office. I need 25 machines. And then I might need another 25 in 6 months or a year. How do you handle those sorts of conversations? Where does that start?
There's a lot. And it's the job of the technology called, you're kind of coordinating as much as you are advising the customer. Because you have to interact with inventory, our purchaser, to find out, okay, what can we get and when can we get it? And that affects our production management, where we have to look at, when do we have the space to work on this many machines and where? So then we start to schedule, when could we do the build, coordinating that with when we can get the parts and things like that. Right. So there's some bigger pictures to it, finding out, customers' timeline, when they need them, when we can get the parts, how quickly we can finish the build and testing process. And we want to make sure to set those expectations up front, because depending on where you call right now, lead times you can get a wide range of answers, and we're definitely aware of that. So it's we want to make sure that we're upfront with people about what to expect and how long it'll take, and coordinating all that is really a big part of it.
Just as kind of a personal question, do you find that there's a lot, or do they have like specific asks when it comes to hardware, or is it just more like, oh, we're a game developer, so like it has to do Unreal and that's it?
I think it's I would say it's less specific. I see more of the specific requests when we're dealing with scientific work, anything that's related to that type of, artificial intelligence. And they tend to be, I know exactly what I need, give me this hardware. With the game development side and other stuff, it can be a mix, because you have folks that are using programs like Unreal that could be doing, just assets and not as complex. We have other people doing, light baking and advanced lighting design and things that are much more complex, and in terms of the hardware and how we would build for it. So in general, you have to kind of analyze that. You also analyze not just timeline, but sometimes it's budget. People say, hey, we use the system this way, but we're allocating about X per system. And that can be a conversation that people, I think, sometimes assume when they give you a budget number that you're going to swing right for the top of that. Sure. But what it really helps us do, because we don't work on commission, we're not here to push you to one thing or the other. My job is to give you the best information so you can make the decision. If you push me a little bit and say, hey, what would you really say I should do? I'll, of course, tell you. Sometimes that can help me know right away. If they say, hey, I'm doing this kind of work, my budget is X, we can go, great, here's the best you can do for that. But setting those, one of my favorite lessons I ever learned in life, not a lot stuck, but one was always expectations are premeditated resentments. And I
for
really
sure.
believe that's true. If
Yeah.
you set it up front and, we'll tell customers, what's your build to ship time? Well, it's about X. And we tell
Mhm.
that's not a guarantee. It's based on the workflow. We're going to make sure we get it right. We're going to do as quick as we can. But, so those type of expectations set up front. But that's really
Yeah.
part of navigating that process with the bigger customers.
Hmm. Oh, actually, we have a good question from Twitch. Actually, Johnny B Cat. Do you have requests on restrictions on the systems so the systems do not encounter viruses? Like kind of keeping the system secure.
Various. It depends on the entity, but we have requests for, encryption. We have requests for. You can do government level stuff where they'll ask you to physically remove the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module from the motherboard. So you're not just disabling it. This thing can't even do it if you want it to.
Yeah.
You'll get requests for systems with no ability to do Wi-Fi, that type of stuff, or no, this port or that port, or it has to have a TPM module. As far as like on the software level, not really something that we get into, but definitely get requests on everything from removable hard drives, you name it. And we address them where we can. Some things like secured cases are not our wheelhouse, but
Sure.
It's always different for every customer. You never know what the need's going to be. So it changes a lot.
Yeah. That was interesting. The first time when I was in production, the first time we had a request to physically remove, or that I encountered a request to physically remove the Wi-Fi. I was like, at first I'm like, this is a little strange. Like you just don't use it, right? Like what's the problem here? And then, you kind of dig into the details of who the customer is and what they're using it for. And then it's like, of course. Yes, that makes sense.
And we probably have some, anybody who's been in the military and the government, that's a lot of times if you have like an SCIF, a secure environment, when you go into CIA headquarters, those computers can't just talk outside of the internet. They have to be restricted for, and I'm not saying that, we're building CIA computers, but just that point. You can have all different levels of security from simple, I'm just being home safe to this can't talk to anything outside this building. And so we try to adapt anything we can. See, Johnny knows his stuff. So it's a challenge, but we take it as it comes. Each one's unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I was curious too. Since the last we spoke, has there been anything that kind of stands out as a interesting or exciting like challenge, or something that really kind of you had to put your thinking cap on for?
I think the biggest challenge in terms of components and hardware right now is the logistical issues of getting parts has affected what we can do, well. If we can't get the part and we can't offer the component or build the system to a level we think it should be built at, we've had to look at some things like really small form factor or certain components that we just had to streamline the way that we build. I think the biggest challenge is what's available. I think adapting has probably been the name of the game more than anything. You might have an availability of something and the next week it might go away. So probably the biggest challenge there.
Yeah.
I think the second one has been, we're seeing, at least I think on the video side, more and more demand for, hey, I've got this 6K, 7K, 8K footage. I need it to be able to do this, frames per second with this effects and noise reduction. And so we're testing that, and the Ryzen processors that we're using have gotten great results. I've been hearing a ton of that, just more and more demand. And the other thing too that I think is really cool is the game development is absolutely on fire right now. Like the amount of developers I'm talking to in a given day is just like, I can't even tell you. It's so cool. So there's a ton going on, and it makes you kind of get excited for what's coming, for the gaming community. So,
yeah. And not just gaming though, because to touch on Unreal, gaming sort of has, or at least the tools that have been traditionally used for gaming are now being kind of leveraged for video, film and TV. And wow, that's super cool.
Sorry. That was the other thing I was going to say is the biggest request more than anything else since The Mandalorian started filming. LED wall technology at least a call a day. I think
wow.
I've done for probably the last, if not every other day. It is huge request for that. I actually have two. That's my next two calls, and we're done here is about LED walls. So that's probably the one thing I'd say that's blown up.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting to hear because that's no joke. I mean, an LED wall is like those sort of volumes are pricey. Like
Yeah.
you're not just getting a bunch of Best Buy monitors and putting them on the wall somewhere. Like this is a serious like investment. Like that's cool to hear. I wonder, can we talk about in a general sense, like what kind of customers? Is this like a university sort of thing? Is this more like film and TV production?
The bulk has been film and TV.
Okay.
Advertising production has been, I want to say probably 50% of that. A few that have called to say, this is what we do. We produce commercials for New York fashion type stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably been 30, 40% of it. But really, that's the bulk of it has been TV. And I think, not to get too into the weeds here, what a lot of people understand is versus a green screen with this LED wall, you used to have to compensate for lighting with green screen. It kind of changes the way that you film everything. And so the LED, it's really fascinating. There's plenty of videos people can watch and really cutting edge, see where it's going. Especially with, this is where you see, I am just fascinated by Unreal, and I'm on like step one of learning about, I have a million steps of learning about it. So but when you see the way people are using this program, really, really cool.
I'm constantly blown away by just how people will take a tool that is, you built it for this particular solution, and then they're like, hey, you know what can we tweak it and maybe do this sort of thing with it? And it's endlessly fascinating. It's so cool. In fact, I just recently saw some commercials for I think it's kind of a spin-off of The Masked Singer. They're doing like a full-on 3D avatar for these people to like sing and dance.
I saw this. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
The head rig with the face map thing and the whole kit.
Oh, man.
And wow, like a little weird. Like it's not content for me, but the technology behind it is what's very cool and very exciting. And I feel like, I mean, even some of the clients we're working with now, like Gabriella, that I know we can talk about her. They're doing something similar. She's working on a full 3D animated movie with a gentleman in London. Like,
oh wow, that is so cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I actually I had a customer just the other day. The entire business is 3D scans of, just take assets that are around me here in the room, the painting, the lamp, and they're digitizing those. They're turning them into game assets, and that's his entire bit. And he's so busy he can't even see straight, and it's
so cool.
It's just really cool because it puts a tool in everybody's hand, and you put the time in to learn it, and it's just the results speak for themselves. People are coming up with all these like creative ways to use it.
So that means so that's like a photogrammetry kind of application then, right? If they're okay, because that actually came up in a meeting earlier for me today. We've been seeing kind of an uptick in that sort of ask, I guess, for those sorts of machines and whatnot. So
and for everything, police using it, quick drone mapping of a crash scene. Now we have a 3D permanent record and get everything out of the way. I have a gentleman who recreates authentic period firearms for Lego and G.I. Joe and other people who create models, a range of different, but he literally is scanning in vintage, whatever it might be, a certain sword or something, reproducing it with a 3D printer or as a game, and then sells it. One guy's doing the same with little miniature battleships. And it's just so creative, so creative. And
that's neat.
That's what's so fun is every call you're like, what's it going to be next? So that's what I enjoy the most about it.
Wow. That is really cool. So Diddy, I think kind of asked a similar question here on Twitch. He says, has anything caught you by surprise recently?
There hasn't. The only reason I want to say no, I know this sounds like such a brush off, but there are surprises every day now to the point that I'm almost unable to be. I'm exhausted. I'm unshockable. It's like this is unavailable or that totally happened or I would say because I think when we say surprise, we inherently think in the shocked or bad way. So
Sure.
one of the things I really think is cool is how adaptable people have been.
Mm.
We all have our moments. You know, we've seen the I freaked out at the grocery store video or whatever, but
Sure.
people have called and said, I gotta have this. And I go, can't do it. We can't get the part. Or this isn't going to be possible until that happens. Or, you know, and people have been so willing to, if you're direct and honest and you know, what you don't ever want to do, if you see sometimes, is take an order and go, hey, it's on back order. We'll have your part. And, you know, so if we're just up front and tell people, here's what we can do, here's what we can't, or here's where to go get it. And I think that's probably been the thing I've been most surprised in an impressed and good way is how adaptable customers are, whatever it is, you know, shipping delays, all the things that have been caused by this time period of the last year and a half. Really neat to see.
That is cool. Actually, that brings up a good question that I wanted to touch on is how you handle when you have to say no. Like I know we get a lot of calls about laptops, and we don't do that anymore. And so how does that conversation go for you?
I'm a big believer that if people know you have their best interest at heart and you're being respectful of what you're delivering, the information and why. Everybody is driven by different things. I'm a big tell me why, because I grew up in a do it or else type household. So I'm like, give me the why. I need to have a legit reason. Start with why. And I've found that when you have to say no, if you tell them why and it's in their best interest, people are receptive to that. Sometimes I'll just tell them, I'll say, I have to tell you no, because I don't want to disappoint you. And I know this will disappoint you. You need X and I can only deliver Y. So one of the biggest things that we're huge on, people who know Puget, is we want the best for the customer. It's so that, you know, it's just that is universal in everything we do here. And that includes if we're not the best fit, you know, telling the customer that. So for me, it's again, it goes back to setting expectations, and it sounds so simple, but sometimes people are afraid to deliver rotten news.
Yeah. Let
me give you an example. I had a customer call yesterday and say, hey, what's the ETA on the system? I mean, we paid in June, and I went and looked it up and they never paid. And you have to go back and go, hey, you know, here's what happened. Here's what I can do to kind of, you know, help make it better. And if you still want to move forward, here's what would need to work. And they were really receptive to that. They understood it was their fault. You do that without, you know, throwing their face. So it's great because as long as you're dedicated to making it work and the customer understands that, they're usually willing to work with you.
Oh, cool. Right on. I like that. This is just more reason to love working here.
We've experienced it. You know, I went to get food last night. And as I was in line at the first restaurant, they closed. Came out, out of blah, blah, blah. We have closed. And I went to the next restaurant. They had a line out the door 40 minutes. And there's that thing of demand and expectations. But, you know, when you've been able to do, like, we had a point where we had a big line here because we were having so many orders and able to tell folks, here's what to expect during the build process. Here's what you're going to see. And more importantly, hitting those marks. That's where people, you know, you build trust and camaraderie, you know, and I think that's something that we've been able to do through this process.
I like that. You mentioned the kind of the build process or the production process, and we've kind of danced around the idea of lead times and stuff. I think, and I'm a little outside of this, being in the periphery of it, but I think we've gotten our lead times down quite a bit. I don't want to hold you to anything in specific, but it's gotten better, right?
It has. And huge shout out to our production team for doing that. Their commitment to catching up the queue. We have added a number of production technicians. We've expanded our ability to do quality control. We have added people in every department that I can think of. So that was a big part of that. Also, another big part of it has just been looking at process efficiency. Is there a way we can do this better? Is this the best methodology for this? We've been outsourcing that. Can we bring it in-house? You know, whatever it was to make the process better. And the net impact of that, and I don't know what customers might be able to comment here, what they've seen at different other, you know, outlets, but we've had, I think at one point, quoting as long as 8 weeks. And now we're currently quoting, I believe, 2 to 3. I know my coworkers will let me know if I missed that. But when we say that, what we're saying is that's an estimation based on our current workflow and our build process. And there is, I think I sent you a link, Houston. You might be able to. I believe the article is like a year old. This is written by our production manager, but this is a great look at our production process step by step. And I think this is something that I wish customers saw more of, because I don't think you see it on the outside unless you place an order and follow the build process. And customers might know that when you place an order with us during the build process, each step of the way, each person who works on the system actually posts updates to your account. So the builders, the testers, inventory, you name it, they're going to send pictures, links. Here's what I'm doing. Here's how it worked. And when you look at that process, you'll see the point of it is that it's done right. We're definitely going to be as quick as we can, but the point is through our testing process to get it correct. And as you know, we purpose build based on the application, and then we test and verify that the system performs at that level before we ship it. If a part fails, we're going to replace that part and rerun all the testing. The complete system has to meet that standard. We'll do that as quickly as we can, but we're not going to sacrifice the build standard on that. So the nice part is I know lead times are crazy. People have been so great as that's all over the place. To answer the obvious question, supply, I would say, is snug. Don't think of things as being completely unavailable. We're not having orders delayed for parts, but we'll tell you, hey, we have this many coming now. Here's the next batch, or we're going to be waiting on this part. And we'll be upfront. We mark it on the website. This is in shortage. Talk to your consultant. They'll tell you what that means. And it's mitigated 99% of those problems. Nothing has held us up really long, especially on the graphics card side, which is everybody's big question.
Yeah, that's always the big one. And absolutely. I think it's really good to highlight that process, because so often we hear, because we're a pre-built PC company, and you always, I can do that for half the price, and it's not always, and I feel like I harp on this a lot being in the social media side of things, is you're not just buying a box of parts. It's all of that process.
Yes.
It's all of that testing. It's when a part breaks, I can just go right over to inventory and get a brand new one. You have to wait 6 weeks or more if you just spent $2,000 on a black market graphics card that doesn't work. Let's hope that
and you may have
happen,
different levels or experience of support that you have to deal with to deal with that return, or that type of thing too.
Yeah.
And that's I'm not afraid to. I'm just a huge fan of our production. Our production folks are so. I had someone who taught me once in life that if you have a rule, people do just enough to not break the rule. But if you have a standard, people will rise to meet it. And the standard is do the right thing for the customer all the time. And it's funny because even if I wanted to slip something through, hey, could you just build it that way? They won't allow it, because that's the way we do things. So it's nice in the sense that, you have that you can trust in the process, but the customer is the one that benefits in the end.
Yeah. Does that come up often where a customer might have a request that kind of is in conflict with our standard? And
frequently.
Oh, yeah.
Frequently. And one of the biggest things you have to communicate is we do things a certain way because of testing and what we believe is the best. I'm not saying that the way you want it done is wrong, or it's just not what we do. And that could be anything from funky RAID setups, or I want a unique type of cooling, or I want that specific case, and we'll say, hey, here's why we don't do that, or here's why we use the part that we use. We try to accommodate it as much as we can. Part of that streamlining during this pandemic is we had to really hone in what did most of our customers need, and we can really be best at for them. And that we've had to eliminate some things, but none of us want to say no, because that's what we're here to help the customer. Sometimes I have to help you by saying, don't put that part you have in your system, because it's going to be a bad experience, and again, if you have the best interest at heart, I think that'll come through.
Nice. Yeah. Deddy mentions is if you followed the Linus Tech Tips videos where they bought the complete systems from various system integrators and then went through their whole customer service. From those, have you seen any of those?
Not, and I don't want to speak for Linus just because he has a pretty wide library. I haven't seen it from him. I know I've seen some of these. And forgive me, I don't have it off the top of my head. We've had so many wonderful creators that we've partnered with, and we've had some videos where they've talked about, the service experience. So
yeah, he has a series. Actually, I think he's done it twice now. A series where he's purchased, and we weren't included because we don't ship to Canada, and Linus is out of Canada, where he's purchased from various competitors of Puget, and well, they're not just our competitors, but in the whole pre-built PC space, and then kind of blind, and then had them like call up with problems and stuff to kind of give a behind the scenes look at how they handle that stuff. It's been pretty shocking. I highly recommend you look into it.
Big fan of it. I had a job in high school in a restaurant, and our training was they took us to another restaurant, had us buy lunch, and had us make mistakes just to see how they handled it. So that's a great, analogy. And Linus has so many great videos, but I love that he did. I have to look that. There's another great one we did. I believe it was with SLR Lounge, where he did a comparison at a price point. So without, it's like, here's what an $8,000 Puget and an $8,000 Apple, and then ran the back. I thought it was such a great system because so many people approach how they purchase a system that way. Here's my budget. Here's what I can realistically do. So those comparisons are great because it gives you an idea of what to expect.
Yeah, especially on the Mac versus PC side, we deal with so many creative applications, and Apple dominated that space for a good 15, 20 years. Like that was, everybody had the old, not just the cheese grater, but you go back further and into the Mac Pros and some of those candy coated looking ones. And a lot of creative houses, that's all they have. And so now moving, since it seems, Apple kind of abandoned that side of things to focus on other product, that kind of leads me to a good question. Has that come up since some folk have had to wait? Is there a lot of question about, should I move to the M1 Mac Pros? Or I know the M2 is coming, the next ARM-based stuff. Yes. Has that been an issue?
I've not had but one or two conversations in that direction. I think a fair amount of it, I would say, has been based on budget.
Sure.
Those are not cheap systems. Some of it has been based on as you said, people get very used to an ecosystem, and I did a system for visual effects. He does visual effects for one of the superhero movie directors. I'll just say that, and I expected this, from him, all this. He's going to need all this 8K, this because it's Hollywood. It's going to type in and he kind of said, "Oh, no. We just use these old systems, and they were all 10-year-old Macs." And he said, "That's what this studio uses because that's what they know. And it works. And they don't want to venture outside that." So what he does with me is he buys systems, he ports it over, does the work twice as fast, puts it back in their ecosphere. It's kind of funny, but the point is it's people get very tied into the way that they do things. So some of that trade-off comes more from the focus of, will what I do on this platform look the same? Will it work the same? Is the foot, how does all that translate? And that to me is the bulk of it, but it's usually focused around budget. Going the other way, what I find is if they are a dual setup shop, they kind of use one system for one specific, whether it's color or this or that, and another system for another specific function. So it's but I think there's a use for both. There really is.
Sure. Man, that's funny to hear that. And I bet he's still saving time. Transferring, we're doing all the work on the Windows PC and then transferring it over to the Mac side.
Huge eye
to turn it in.
Yeah.
Because it's just probably so much faster working on the PC that the transfer part just doesn't make him hardly any difference.
Yeah, and I think also you have to consider this. The conversation you always have with people is, what's your end product? the deliverable? Are people even watching it in a resolution? You know, sometimes people get very caught up in things without thinking about what's the final product even going to be seen as.
Yeah, man.
There's so many pieces of that puzzle that you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might be beating a dead horse here, but that I imagine is a topic that comes up often. Is like, I want to produce, I want to work in 8K. Like, oh, I'm buying all these cameras and stuff. I'm going to need this system, and then it turns out, oh, I'm just going to be uploading it to YouTube. Is it difficult to kind of throw cold water on somebody like that, to maybe kind of rein them in and say, hey, you probably don't have to spend 10 grand on a computer if really all you're doing is a YouTube show or something?
Yeah, I don't think it's difficult. Again, when it comes to setting expectations, here's what hardware can do right now. And by the time you're going to be at a point where everyone's watching YouTube in 4K, or this system you're buying now is not going to be relevant. You'll be on to something else. But you also have to set expectations. Hardware really isn't there yet for a lot of that stuff.
Sure.
And try to get one of the biggest, it's kind of like exercise equipment. You know, people buy that treadmill and it becomes a laundry hanger in their bedroom.
Yeah.
People always, well, in 5 years, I'm going to start doing blah, blah, blah. Well, you're probably buying a system for that when you get there. This won't be the system you're doing it. So if you're working in 1080 now, let's worry about 8K in 5 years. Sure. Let's build you a system that can do 1080, 4K, and maybe push to a little 5, you know, with some extra memory. Or build you, what I really love to do, Houston, is build a system that has the expandability. Let's set you up for 4K. You got enough to add memory and another hard drive or this and that, where you're doing 6K in a couple of years. So you've got a little growth built into the system. I think that's a much better approach. Because you can swing for the fences and it'll do it to a degree, but things change constantly. So I would I always tell people, get less into the future and look more like 6 months. What's realistic? How soon are you going to be doing that? And when you approach it that way, I think you get a better build.
Yeah. I agree. Man, Daddy is knocking it out here. He asks, whoops, where'd my mouse go? Have you seen, there was a tweet, and so I know the tweet he's talking about. Have you seen the tweet where an old customer answered he was still on a 4th gen Intel, and in relation, what's the biggest upgrade that you've seen in terms of hardware? So a little context. I think this was in relation to Windows 11. There was a previous customer of ours still rocking like a 4790 system.
Wow.
Which that is pretty old. I want to say 10 years.
Okay, I'm trying to do the math on the time period because I have one that's around that. I had a customer call. We're doing the console, and I wish I had a good answer on processor because I was so stunned by. We were talking about hard drive, and I eventually realized he had a SCSI platter, and I finally asked. I was like, "That's your primary is a platter," and he explained the connection. I realized he was talking about an IDE cable, the old way they used to connect. And I'm going back at least 15 years in my mind, going. And I finally said, "What do you?" And the version of the software he was running was from 2009. And at that point, the system was already like 5 years old. So this system was from 2005. I wish I could remember the CPU, but the hard drive was old enough that it just stunned me. And that was the biggest. Those are fun because you. I've had some customers, not in the system. We have some customers that use some external devices that can use really old serial connections. Sure. And if you buy, like one of them was someone who does custom sign and embroidery. And this machine's like 30 years old and it weighs like 2 tons. Like you're not going to move that or sell it until you absolutely have no other choice. And so she's, we need to get this working. So those are the fun ones because there's this kind of like, all right, how do we make the past, come to life and string along a few more years? And I totally understand. I play all my vintage games and I'm always, every time Windows updates, I'm trying to make them work in the new version. And fun challenge, but we can usually do it.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, I think I shared the article you wrote about that particular customer. Screen printing. I think I shared that earlier today. So, it was a 4670. Wow. Yeah.
I did not see that tweet. What's interesting is that was that processor on the ARC real quick here.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 core. So I had the mobile version of this processor. That was my last CPU.
Oh, wow. For your personal machine?
When I was traveling, before I did this, I was an announcer. I had to travel full time. So that was my,
Oh,
I had a laptop. And then my current system I built last spring was 9900K and a 3070. So hoping to upgrade here. I'm really excited about the new AMD processor.
yeah, for sure. That's, I want, do you find our customers, do they care much about like brand loyalty in that sense? Like, or do they just say, I just need it to work. I don't care.
I'd say it's a mix.
Yeah.
About half are really dedicated. And I wouldn't say they're averse. Some maybe have had a bad experience. And, that could be a 1 in a million. You buy something and you happen to get the one that the manufacturing, the machine screwed up on it. It can mark how you feel about that brand. So,
Sure.
that's really it can be a tricky one. It really can.
Yeah.
What I try to focus people on is we have options on either platform that can do what you need to do. So if you have a preference, sometimes there's software related reasons that will,
Oh, sure.
if you're using MATLAB is compiled against the Intel MKL. So we're going to try to really emphasize, being on that platform. But sometimes it is it's a nice discussion, but having had both myself, sometimes it's easier to approach and say, hey, I've done both, or here's the results we've had. Here's the failure rates, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But it's a mix. I'd say it's about half customers really have a preference. So we try to just help them stay with what they like.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. Because I know for me personally, I'm I grab onto the data, right? And I'm like, why? Why would you do this when clearly this is the better option? And so this is why I'm not in your position. Because I feel I mean, maybe, but I see it a lot, in the comments on some of our articles and things. Like there's folk out there who, I don't know, mistrust the testing, or they think that we're just saying this stuff because we have to, or because we're paid to, or whatnot. And I get a little frustrated because this is data. Like we approach our testing in a very scientific manner. Like we tell you all the parts that we use to get these results, and we even give the benchmark software, the same stuff that we use in the labs that's 100 feet away, the same stuff. And it's just frustrating sometimes for me.
Those can be tough to overcome. I've had people flat out tell me, I sent them a link. Here's our testing results. And they say, you don't know what you're talking about. All right. Sometimes you have to disagree to disagree.
Sure.
But it is the other thing that's important is understanding how to interpret that data.
Sure. Okay.
Because what do you look at when you look at a processor? I bet anybody who responded in the comments, first thing they're going to say, oh, it's 3.6 gigahertz, the speed, right? What's the cache? Do you even know what the cache does, the different layers of cache, how that affects what a processor runs? How many PCI lanes? Do you know the difference between max turbo and all core turbo? And
that's an interesting point, because a lot of those kind of I guess like sub metrics or other sorts of details didn't used to be as important as it is now. PCI lanes is a big one. If you were rocking 3-4 graphics cards and you don't have a CPU that can handle it, or along with a bunch of SSDs or something like that, those sorts of questions are a lot more important than they used to be in the past. And so, and
that's the kind of stuff that you said that'd be the equivalent of going to buy a car and knowing the valve timing on the engine. There are people that know that stuff. I don't. I'm not good at it. But even just understanding is something as simple like if you put the current, like the Core i7 against the 5900 Intel and AMD on paper, that Intel is a rocket. You look at it on paper, you're like, no comparison. It's like 3.5 or 4.5, 5.3. I'm all over the place. But the point is, there's a huge difference in speed. And then you go look at our test results, and that Ryzen is at the top every single time.
Right.
And people go, I don't get it. And that's when you get into the conversation, because do you understand, this chip is more efficient. It does more per clock cycle. Here's how much more cache it has where it can store up those instructions. And or little things like PCI lanes, you know, a lot PCI 3.0 versus 4.0. You know, there's twice the bandwidth. How does that affect graphics card performance? And interpreting all that, especially in the context of what application are you using? Because is is it even relevant to the work that you're doing?
Sure.
It's a total picture process. And it's one of those things where I tell folks that it really is 90% of the process with us is here. Once we get it to production, me and the customer have perfected what they need, and production will do their thing, which is great. But deciding, I always tell folks, it's like picking the engine in your car, and you nail that and you get everything else and all the little features that you want. And if you do that up front, you'll be able to any of the issues that you can imagine, you'll be able to mitigate.
Yeah, that's cool. I wonder, this one's going to be a little kind of, well, I don't know. It's just opinion piece, I suppose. Looking forward, let's say like the next year or so, or just in the future in general, what are you excited for?
Oh boy. There's a lot, you know, obviously we had a great last year with these new graphics cards. I'm excited that we're seeing new models, which means more cards getting into more people's hands, more things being done. That's starting to alleviate. I know it's not perfect, but it's better. There's a lot of cool stuff coming on the CPU side. I'm really excited for, you know, what's coming on both from Intel and AMD. These Zen 3, anything with Zen 3 cores on it is really cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was my next comment. It was the new Intel CPU. I think folks also saw we just had new Xeon Ice Lake came out. So there's a lot going on. If you blink, you'll miss it. It's like constantly changing. I think we're going to still see some supply stuff going on, just so folks are aware that there's a shortage of raw materials right now, the logistics, the supply chain. It's not perfect. We mitigated as best we could, but I think that's going to tighten. And then you also have holiday season, which increases that.
Oh, yeah.
But what I'm really excited about is when you have this level of, you know, one-upsman, you know, Intel responds and AMD responds, and then the graphics card, and there's this constant, and we benefit because we get this cool technology that we get to do this stuff with. So you really want to ask me, that's what I'm excited about more than anything. It's just like, oh my gosh, as these companies continue to innovate and then you see what people are doing with it, every day, it makes every day in the office really, really cool.
Cool. I'm personally very excited for the Intel graphics card that's coming.
Yes. Well, that's really, that is going to be interesting. I cannot wait to see. You know, I know Matt and William and our labs crew will be all over. They'll have some great stuff, you know, when it does get testing and everything else. So.
Yeah, I have fingers crossed that it is at least kind of. I hope it at least is a competitor. I hope it's not just like some whatever. It's going to be a budget thing or nobody's really going to care. I hope it actually does kind of step in and at least compete to like that mid range. I hope. Fingers crossed.
I really do too, because I think you see what people are doing with graphics acceleration. I just think it's ripe for competition and innovation. There's so much going on, and it'll be really cool to see what comes with that. That's probably one of the products I'm most excited for.
Yeah, that'll be really neat. I'm excited. Gritsby55 on the Twitch asks, how much has Ryzen improved in the stability of drivers? So this might be touching on a support question. Intel platforms have been known to have very stable drivers that make it reliable.
Yeah, and that's something that and I, you know, I'm never shy about addressing this stuff head on, because people will take things that they experienced 10 or 15 years ago and go, that company is da-da-da, you know, and there's a time period, where there were some issues with some Intel stuff. We're not experiencing that. And also understand, again, this is when Houston talked about data, folks, everything through testing, that includes BIOS. We're not necessarily on the most current BIOS. We're going to be on the most stable, best performing BIOS that we've tested. Even if that includes, sometimes we'll turn to the manufacturer and get some customization to it if we need to. So big time. I would say, I can't speak for our production department, but not having any of those issues. Great stability on the platform, great performance, especially when you're doing high performance computing work, rendering, whatever it is. Folks are just reporting no problems. So it's been a huge improvement, and I appreciate you asking that, because I think sometimes people get, that assumption, and you forget that this competition is what makes those companies innovate and get better at that stuff. So stability's been great on the AMD platform. It continues to be on the Intel side as well. So.
Mm-hmm. I'm personally also glad that you asked, because I have a note to talk to our support department about that specific, not specifically drivers, but I want to look into failure rates or problems that have between Intel and AMD, since AMD has kind of overtaken, I don't know, well over 50% of our sales now are AMD. And so I was curious myself, so that, because I'm the social media person, I wanted to maybe get that out in front of people to see, because yes, Intel does have that reputation of being very stable and kind of rock solid, especially like on the Xeon side of things, compared to maybe earlier Threadripper and Threadripper Pro stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you asked that, and I will have a more firm answer on a general sense of the failure rates between those two soon. So thank you for asking.
But I'm 100% confident. I'm starting my next personal build, and it is going to be 5900 or 5950 Ryzen platform. Totally confident in the platform. It's been great.
Yeah, especially the Ryzen side. I just built a 5800X myself. The CPU side of things is rock solid. The Zen 3 stuff is amazing.
Oh man, I don't want to harp on it. I think people know, but those cores really are something special. They really are, and the testing, speaks for itself. So it's just so cool that I said I got to have one. So I'm going to jump ship and get over there.
Well, now that they've caught up with Intel, I hope they put some time and effort into their graphics card side of things.
Well, and so. Just so I'm sure a lot of customers know, or folks watching know this, what is so great about that processor is when you're looking at an application, we're looking at, is it single threaded? Is it multi-threaded? How does it interact with the CPU? This is a sales guy's way of saying it, so forgive me the folks that can say it better than I can. Single threaded sends basically one instruction and gets one answer at a time. It's an oversimplification. That happens in a fraction of a second. Single threaded apps rely on speed. Multi-threaded apps send multiple instructions. They get multiple things back and assemble that into a data output. Multi-threaded apps rely on cores. Traditionally, as cores go up, speed goes down. And the goal is to find a sweet spot. Used to be, if you took a single-threaded app and put it on a multi-threaded chip, you would have not the greatest experience. Sometimes you'd have some slowdown. What is so great about the Ryzen product that I love, they're very, very efficient cores. So in the Ryzen line, we have 10, 12, and 16 cores, but the efficiency and speed of those cores gives you the ability, this great sweet spot of, I have parallelization so I can do multi-threaded work. I have excellent core speed, which if anybody works in design animation, it's all about core speed. And these chips give us the ability to do both better than any product has to this point. So sorry for the spiel. I'm not, you just advocate for what you know. And the result has been, when you spoke earlier about the customer talking about time, that's my favorite thing. His absolute favorite thing in this job, as corny as it sounds. Time is the most valuable thing we have. And when a customer calls and says, my renders used to take 4 hours, or I'm processing with Topaz and it used to be 45 minutes and now it's under a minute. My render is 45 set, It's like, hey, I just gave this person 3 hours of their workflow back, their day. Yeah, that's the stuff that is cool. And so if there's any one thing I'm most excited about right now, it's efficiency. We're taking this technology and we've put so much power and voltage to them, and now we're going, hey, how can we make it run better with less? And so that's what's so cool about this process. And I think you're just going to see more of that in the coming months, because now that they're competing with each other, trying to do it better, faster, smaller, more efficient. And there's going to be some cool stuff coming next couple years.
I love hearing those stories too, because to me that highlights the impact of what we do the most. I say this all the time. There's a line about McDonald's. You think about McDonald's is not a burger company. McDonald's doesn't sell burgers. McDonald's is a real estate company. They own the most valuable real estate anywhere on the planet, everywhere on the planet. That is their business, is buying the best land possible. We are not really a computer company. We sell time. We sell time back to a customer, whether that's saving time on their renders, saving time on the research of parts, saving time on support, saving time wherever it is in the process. We're selling you that time back to you.
Yes. And that, when you talked earlier we talked about cost and price and that stuff, people say that to you. Well, I had a guy the other day. So what is your build fee? Well, we don't have a build fee. We don't do that. But there's a lot of things customers don't see that our production team does. And that's a great comment Didi just made. He said also saving time on headache. Do you know how many times a week I get a call from someone who says, I've built my own systems for 20 years. I need to focus on content creation. I don't have time to deal with this when it breaks down. And those things that our team does, memory testing, 17, 18 different benchmarks per system, custom cut laser. Most people don't even know we do that. It's like, I'm like, tell them. People say, why do you cost what we cost? All the research, the post-build testing, thermal imaging your system, checking water, everything about your system we can check, we're checking because that helps us support it long-term. But what I hope people see is that if we're willing to invest that much in it, hopefully that speaks to the value that we provide. We say, hey, we're going to stand behind this thing. We're putting our life into it before we ship it. And here's all the proof. We tested it and sent it all to you at the same time. It's just a different approach to how you build a system. But you can look at price, you can look at value. I can go buy those parts and build it myself, but I don't know what the outcome might be good. It might be bad, depending on my build skill. So I think that to me is the inherent value. Someone who's willing to do the work and say, proof's in the pudding, here it is, and I'll put my name on it, that's why I love working here,
And we literally do. You go back into the status updates and stuff, we literally do put our name. Everybody who touches your order has their name on it. Like you can, that, well, it's not Kelly anymore because he's not in inventory anymore, but Kelly's the one who pulled the parts, or Jason's the one who put it together, and or whoever, because sometimes it's 2 or 3 different assembly folk, depending on things happen. This person installed the operating system. This person did quality control. This person, and literally, you can say that's the person. And
I'll tell you what,
I love
huge shout out to our quality control team, Ruben, AJ. If there is a group of people who are like the gatekeepers of Puget's spirit, it's QC. It will not get past them if it does not meet our standard. And I'll never forget, everyone here starts by working in production and learning how to build. And I'll never forget the first time I put a system and I was so proud of what they're going to do. And I got it back and he said, this screw had a quarter turn more tightening up. And I went, if that's the metric that we judge ourselves by, this is a good experience. So it's I love that. So a huge shout out to our production folks and and I appreciate that. Yeah, we do. What folks don't know that we do custom cut acrylic bracing on CPU and GPU in all of our systems. It locks it in position for shipping, keeps it in position for life. Huge benefit. And everyone who's had one of these 3000 series cards knows how big and heavy they are.
Oh, man.
Those are things you learn from years of building and learning lessons,
And that's again, that's something that maybe somebody who's built PCs on their own doesn't consider, because especially with these heavy cards over time, that, I mean, you see it in pictures. Oftentimes people show their personal builds and stuff, the GPU sag. Well, over time, that's probably going to damage the PCI slot. And
the first time I saw, if anyone's seen the 3090, and you guys are watching, especially the Founders Edition 30, it's like a lead brick. I mean, it's just, first time I saw it, I thought that poor PCI slot is just probably hanging on for dear life, trying not to break. But and you'll see motherboards with like the armor, the PCI slot armor, but it's really just, might as well be tin foil on the edge of the edge of this plastic that's not holding anything in. In fact, I don't think I've shared them, but we've had a few not go so well in shipping. A big quad, this was a couple of years back, I think now, a big quad GPU system, and some, it didn't survive, and the whole thing is just, all 4 of them still connected together, but they're all like that. Oh my goodness. The one benefit I tell customers is that these are not said the box is a good 3 foot by and 40 feet. So they're not, fortunately, they're not easier for shipping carriers to throw around, but they can still be knocked over and things come dislodged. So we've learned how to mitigate 99%. But the good thing is if something does happen, you're covered. We'll take care of it. So
it's shocking sometimes because it's just
and what is more disappointing? You're so geared up. I have sometimes when customers are waiting for they'll email every day like, is it going to be here? I'm so excited. And nothing worse than when that shows up in the out of boxes is not good. So we want to mitigate that as quickly as can to make sure that we will stand behind it.
Yeah, it is cool to see sometimes when the shipping box looks a little sketchy, like, oh man, there's like a footprint or like it's kind of smushed in this corner,
or a hole through the front. Yeah,
but then you get to the inside and it's perfect. And
on that link we had you post earlier,
mm-hmm.
they'll see that too. You can see our shipping setup, I believe, is on there. If not, you can also find it on our webpage. But sort of a double hold system, kind of cool. Keeps them from tearing it apart.
Very smart, very cool, and it just comes back around to that whole philosophy of like it's about taking care of the customer, making sure they can do their thing the best way possible.
Yep, and there are definitely challenges to that with parts and things going forward. I think if people watch and haven't seen it, my email is first name Jared at Puget Systems. If you have some of those questions, please feel free to reach out. Always glad to ask. We have people who would check in and say, is part available? I'll call you in 2 weeks. And it can help time when you're buying a system. So, we appreciate all the feedback from our customers, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions for me. I'm always glad to help with that stuff.
Awesome. I think that is the perfect way to wrap it up. We are just a little bit over
timing.
our hour. So you heard it. If you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to Jared. He's happy to help out with whatever he can. So thank you, Jared, for taking your time out of the day. To
thanks for having me.
You probably got to run off and get some emails or phone calls taken care of. So we'll wrap it up real fast. Thank you as well to the audience for joining us today. We do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific. We have internal experts and employees like Jared and our Labs team and Ben, our support manager, on every once in a while as well, to kind of give you guys a peek behind the curtain of how we do our thing and to kind of help provide some value to you as either customers or fans of ours. So be sure to mark your calendars, Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye.